peace of mind when I'm with you. What did we do? Fighting about nothing all the time. I can't get lost.
Online joining us, we have Ms. Kgaugelo Mudau, who is a publisher and also a chairperson of the Publishing Association of South Africa. As I mentioned, we will be discussing or actually engaging on the topic of defining literature in an online world. And once again, welcome. So perhaps just as a starting point, let me ask the question to Mr. Masuku, graphic novelist. They always say a picture speaks 1,000 words. We see all these graphics that are displayed in newspapers. There would be a current affair issue, and we do engage with that. And we find that it speaks just much more than what is written in words. If you can just take us and draw us into your world to say, what does a graphic novelist do? And its relevance in our current generation as well.
Thank you, Pauline. Sanbonan, good morning, everyone. Igama Usia Masugu. I am a writer, I'm an illustrator. In a sense, I'm a graphic novelist. What is a graphic novel? It's a book with pictures and words. It's formulated in a way that it looks like a comic book, for instance. So whether you call it a comic, whether you call it a graphic novel, it's really the same thing. It's generally just the length of the book that makes it a graphic novel. They tend to be a lot longer, or just a little longer than a comic. Now, what goes into it is, yeah, the process is lengthy. It takes writing, and then once it's written, you send it through to an editor. As the editor edits, then the illustrations happen, the artwork, the drawings. And all of this happens in synchronicity. And the project can take anything from a week, depending on how big the team is, to a decade, depending on how long the project is. But yeah, graphic novels are that, and I think they're an important medium because you can highlight very important issues on a political level. You can also highlight whimsical issues, things that are fun to read about. So yeah, it's a medium that is very important and can really be used to express any sort of concept.
Thank you so much, Butsia. I just want to follow up on that. Have you found the graphic element of it? Because you did say that they do run parallel. The graphic form of it or the written form, which one have you found it to communicate a much stronger message when you do talk about current affairs, when you do talk about conversations or you engage in conversations in the creative sector?
Yeah, that's a very good question because I mean, the way I used the medium is to try and hopefully teach a language, isiZulu in this instance. So, for instance, if you've got an image of a river, which is water, right? And when you write amanzi, there is a way to let someone who doesn't know the language get a gist of what water is in that language, ngesiZulu. So for me, the words and the pictures, they go hand in hand in that you don't have to say everything. You can use the words to express an idea. I mean, you can use the pictures to express the idea. Or you can be very minimalistic with your image and show the idea in words. I say show the idea in words because as there are writers here, they would know that it's about showing and not telling, right? And to be able to do that, to be able to write something without telling, but showing in the mind of the eye, it takes a bit of doing. But that's the fun part of telling stories.
Thank you. Let me welcome our online panelist, Ms. Kgaugelo Mudau. Are you able to hear us?
Yes, good morning.
From the tech team, and I'll just allow Ms. Kgaugelo Mudau just to rope us into your world in terms of the world of publishing. And I think if you can just take us through the publishing continuum. I mean, we've had a whole lot of written literature on hard paper throughout the years. Now we're going digital, etc. just draw context into your world. Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Good morning.
I think you're still muted. Just try again. We'll confirm as soon as we can hear you.
I'm not on mute on my side. Can you hear me now?
I think it's just a technical glitch on our end. If you can just
Yeah.
hold on for us, I think we can hear you now. Thumbs up.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Thanks.
All right. Okay. So my name is Hawana Mudau, and I am an educational publisher. I've been in the publishing industry for quite a while now. We do educational textbooks, so school textbooks ranging from grade 1 to grade 12. We do literature books as well. So, and I'm also in the PASA committee, where we, as a chairperson of the skills development and training sector, where we sort of look at the gaps in publishing and try to fill those gaps. So in terms of publishing right now, there isn't much happening in publishing, in terms of school publishing, because if you have the background of school publishing, we work with curriculum development, and at this stage we are basically just waiting to hear from the DBE and how far that is, and then we can get working with that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kgaugelo. Just a follow-up question on that. We've seen a lot of young people come up with literature, some as young as the age of 7, that are like literally trying to get their conversation or the message of their generation out there. How have you seen that you actually rope them into your space to give them a platform as well in the publishing world?
Yeah, I mean, as part of the PASA, so what we do at PASA, there's a lot of members. We call them our members. Those are our publishing houses. So you can see a lot of publishing houses come into the into the industry, basically into the country, and trying to make sure that we rope the young authors by different kinds of programs. So what we're trying to do as well as PASA is we're trying to have programs that would encourage young writers, more especially the emerging authors, because it's really difficult to get into the publishing industry. It is one industry that people don't really know about. So we see a lot of our members, which is our publishing houses, coming in the upfront by having a lot of programs. There's quite a lot of them that I can mention, that if you go into the website, namely I know that Via Africa, they have like a program that you can go and sort of submit your manuscript, and then from there on, and then they can sort of guide you into publishing your manuscript. So we see a lot of publishers coming in front just to make sure that we have emerging writers being published. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Let me move on to Prof. Lindsay Stibble from UKZN. And let me bring the question to you about literacy tourism. If you can just also similarly draw us into your world to say, what is that? I mean, we do know tourism in terms of visiting places. I'm in Durban now, I'm going to see the coast. But in terms of literature and actually participating in or linking it to the tourism space, if you can just paint a picture for us.
for a new generation to pick it up. All my stuff is online. I've got a PowerPoint somewhere, but there's the website address. If we, I know the tech team's at the back, but I'll try and get it up for you. Because I was just thinking, as both the previous speakers were saying, in a way, literary tourism can do the jump from the word to digital to graphic, because it's a lot of it's online now. I mean, we devised actual trails. We used to take students and people around Grey Street, in fact, Grey Street, we had a lot of the writers of South African writers of Indian descent, but Steve Biko's Grey Street, actually, too. You know, there's very interesting, we've got tons and tons of people you'll think of as politicians, maybe, or, I don't know, BC or whatever it might be, but they were writers too. So if you're interested in the writing side, so that's like the Luthuli Museum up the ground floor, Mazizi Kunene in Glenwood. There's nothing for Lewis, but you can go and see his parade. And there are tons of writers, but it can make that jump from the word to a kind of image in your head, I guess, and then certainly digital. I mean, there's a huge online presence. Sorry, could we have next slide? Just in case there's... Yeah, I just want to say much of what I say we condensed into this book called A Literary Guide to KZN. It brings all that we said in 20 years together in this book, and it's by Niall, who was my research assistant for many years, and myself. So if you're interested, I've got a few copies of that. That's Peyton's the obvious one. I'll stop now if you want to carry on. Next slide, maybe. People know Alan Peyton, Cry the Beloved Country. Okay, maybe just stop there, thanks. That's our logo, and that's the website. We've got about 180 author entries. Anyone who's linked to KZN, English, isiZulu, Portuguese, French, whatever language people are writing in, from this province. And last thing to say, you might say, you know, how is someone a KZN writer? And we kind of quite broad. Either you must be born here, you must have lived here, and written about here, and you might have died here. Not all four. Lewis, funnily enough, does all four. Alan Peyton's all four. Most people, though, may be born, go away, do something else, die somewhere else, sadly, hate to mention, but you know what I mean. Anyhow, someone like Angelina Satebe, she was from Inanda Seminary, wrote, but you know, there's Lewis, documentary films. We got a nice film on him when he was here. And trails. Thanks very much. Maybe I'm a stop.
Thank you so much, Prof. I just wanted to go back to you again, Lucia, to say one of the unique things that we have as Africans is content. A lot of literature, a lot of publications have been written about the Western world, or sometimes we have literature about Africa, but it's from a different perspective. So in terms of the work that you do, you did mention that also in the space of vernacular, you use this graphics to be able to depict that. So I just wanted to pick your brain on that to say, how do you bring this amazing African or South African context out? How do you ensure that you also pull it out in spaces maybe where the writers or publishers may be far from reach?
So I went into a bit of a frustrating period several years ago when I would walk into the bookstores, you know, the major bookstores, and I'd look for books in my mother tongue or any other indigenous language. And you'll walk into a big hall, and most of the books are in English, and then the rest in Afrikaans, and then they'll point you to a small corner in the room, and they'll tell you all the other languages are there, okay? And that's like 5% of the books that are in the shop at the time that are in one corner, and they are dedicated to the languages that are indigenous to South Africa, in South Africa. And I thought there was a shame. And it has changed. You know, things have gotten better, but it's still pretty much, it's like you go anywhere and you see welcome or welcome, and it's very difficult to find Wamgiligili. And for me, we need to fix that. So I wrote the book Siyafunda isiZulu mainly, this was in 2015, mainly as a support for schools in Soweto, particularly a school where my mom teaches. So I donated books there. But then people started wanting more of those. And the whole making books process started happening from there, and we made several books since. But the COVID situation also made me realize that we need to expand beyond just the printed books. We need to get the books on a digital platform. In that way, they can reach a much wider audience. Now, this also meant that the type of content needs to be, they say representation matters. Okay, we want, for instance, children to see themselves in the books. We want to create characters, heroes, that look like the children, okay, that have curly hair, brown skin, for the children to aspire to be more. Because I grew up with a lot of books. I was lucky enough because my mom's a teacher. I grew up with a lot of books that are in English from Europe, and I was seeing blonde kids playing in the snow, and that's okay because my perspective shifts. I get to travel the world in a way, but I never saw myself, hardly ever, and it's something that I felt needed to change for the future generation. Now, the other aspect is that if you go online now and you Google, say, mythology, just type mythology on the search engine, and what will you get? You'll get Greek mythology, you'll get the likes of Zeus and all that, or you get Norse mythology, Thor and stuff, if I've got it correct. But it's very rare that you'll find, when you Google mythology, you won't find Ushaka. And obviously, Ushaka, I suppose, he's more than a myth. We all know that. But who is writing in Zomi? Who is telling the stories of our great people, How will the children who are reading books know about their own people, their own language? And not just reading books. When they go online and they want to watch a film, an animated film, why aren't we showing them an animated film of maybe any of their heroes who are South African or even African? And these are the things that we are trying to shift in what we do. I hope I did answer your question.
You did certainly answer my question. Thank you so much. And I just wanted perhaps to delve on something that you mentioned about the importance of relevance, when people can relate to what they read. I did mention also in the initial part of the previous question, is the issue of context. I think there's a richness that sometimes we tend to miss. And I always say, when we travel the globe, we want to be like everyone else, but sometimes we forget. It sort of affects how we view ourselves and how we sort of identify or link or promote that identity. I know you did touch on it already, but I think I still want that emphasis on that part, and then I will continue.
For me.
I'll give it to Busia again, and then I'll...
Actually, could you just rephrase the question?
The richness of our context, to say, because you're a graphic novelist. How do you promote it? How do you encourage it amongst young people to say, this is who we are, this is, you're helping us love who we are, using the type of space of literature that you play in?
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, there are various ways. I mean, say in the 80s, I'm going to touch on the musical side of the arts. Not in the 80s, in the 90s, we had Kwaito. It was a very sort of new form of music at the time, and it had its own style. So you had maybe people like Arthur Mafokate, who were really pioneering the genre. But if you listen to Kwaito today, it's changed. Kwaito is still around. It's just not as as popularly known, of course, Snake Home and Amapiano, but the point is all of these stem from that genre, and it has grown. Now, in a sense, it has become cool. It has stayed relevant, or it has stayed cool anyway. So we still listen to a lot of that. It's the same in literature. We used to have Ubabo Sibusiso Nyembezi, C.L.S. Nyembezi, and he wrote the novels. The one famous one, obviously, Nkintsela Yasemgungundlovu, The Rich Man of Peter Maritzburg. But he wrote so many of these books, and I have a great collection of his work. And it is such it's so important what he has done for us, because today I can open a book on Zulu proverbs and I can learn Zulu proverbs, you know, and we needed to continue that in terms of writing and telling stories. And I think today it's still happening. It's probably not popular, but it's happening. In my instance, I've got a term I call Cool Zulu. Okay, I spell it Khul Zulu, one word. I truly believe that as writers, as content creators, we need to reinvent ourselves through our work. In other words, like I could ask anyone in the crowd, what is a tiger in isiZulu? I don't think I'll get an answer. And it's understandable, because it's not like tigers were roaming around KwaNongoma back in those days, right? But why aren't we inventing the name then? You know, what, Sizoibizi tiger? No, let's come up with a name. And these are the sort of things. So the whole idea of Cool Zulu is saying, okay, when I'm in space, what is that thing, isiZulu, you know? Oh, there isn't a name? Well, let's call it. And let's come around, let's discuss it, you know? And this is the thing of trying to keep the language or the culture relevant, is that we need to partake in it, and we need to not be afraid to say, let's do it this way now.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Butsia. Khawukhelo, are you still with us online?
Yes, I am.
I just want you to perhaps talk to us about the protection of emerging writers' intellectual property. How do we do that in the current era? I know previously we have literature that's written, and because it's been published, etc., in books, I think that served as a form of IP protection. But now we've got upcoming scripts, like you mentioned earlier. How do we retain that, and how do we protect intellectual property of emerging writers? Thanks.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So, of all the intellectual property rights, so maybe I should just start with saying that, you know, intellectual property breaks into different categories, such as copyright, trademark, patent law. So copyright would be the right to control your written words, and then trademark would be the right to control your brand name, logo for a company, and all those other things. And then with patent law, it usually doesn't really apply to authors. But of all these laws that I've mentioned, copyright remains the most significant. And if you know copyright law, it's basically just like an exclusive right granted by law. So basically, it's a legal concept describing the rights given to creators for their literary and artistic works, which includes books, music, works of fine arts, such as paintings and, you know, sculptures and anything that, you know, one can come with. So now, you know, when you come to copyright law, you don't need to even register to protect what you have. So, but what is very important, what emerging writers need to understand is that a work does not need to be published or made available to the public to be protected. It is protected from its creation. So copyright law protects sort of only the form of expression of ideas, but not the ideas themselves. So for you, in order to have that, you know, protection, you need to have it created in some form. I hope I'm making sense. So how, in terms of how emerging writers can protect the intellectual, there's quite a lot of ways. And one of the ways that I would like literally recommend is to work with sort of reputable publishers or publishing houses. because they know. So working with reputable publishers, it's vital because they understand that it is imperative that they understand that they are more than merely the packager of information, bringing it from like to the marketplace. So the publisher gives substance and they add value to the original creative work, so that the book publishing value chain continues. So if you go into the PASA website, you'll find quite a lot of publishing houses that you can work with as an emerging writers, because then they would have to sort of, with publishing houses, they know what they need to do in terms of developing contracts, in terms of what kind of contracts they need to be so that you can be protected and what you have written and what is put in there is protected. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachelo. Let me go back to Prof. Lindy around the space of literature and tourism. As a student myself, one of the biggest things that I've found is when we write academic literature, we tend to cite a lot of top-rated journals which are Western. You find the American Journal of Psychology or American. How do you ensure that from a university perspective, we start promoting the referencing of literature that is our own? Because if we constantly want to speak about a South African context, but we are referencing literature or giving relevance to the South African context using Western or American or European literature, are we not missing anything there? How do we ensure that we retain that or bring that into our publications?
Okay, that's an interesting question. From an academic point of view, I guess you often will be doing internet searches, that kind of thing, if you're a student doing papers. And as you were saying, it's whoever comes up first, so that is a problem. I don't know how much students physically use libraries anymore, because that's then if the librarians can make sure they're covering the local or the South African academic journals, they usually would have them, and that's important to do. And then it's up to, I guess, the lecturers to, they need to know who's writing. Because I agree with you, it's really, really important. I mean, we're sitting here on the southern tip of Africa, and sometimes you think we might as well be, I don't know, in New York or wherever. So it is important to encourage local in terms of, national stuff, but also I'm really, really interested in local, which is why, just back to literary tourism, my project was on KZN, because I'm from here, born here, I've lived here, worked here. And I think KZN is often underrated from a literary point of view, whereas I think we're really, really rich. We've got such a sweep of thinking of languages too. I do feel that we don't have enough isiZulu entries on our website. We've encouraged, so if anyone ever wants to suggest writers that we could have represented, I'm very open to, people must just approach us and say, listen, can I give you my little profile? Normally if you Google literary tourism, we come up as one of the first hits, and so it's a useful way of spreading the word. If you are a writer, if you want to get your work out there, it's a free platform. I'm more than happy to put up samples, as long as it's a published work that people can access somehow. Then that's great. And it gives me a lot of pleasure. I mean, I talked about people coming in from maybe overseas conferences and stuff. That's fine if those people want to go to Inanda or wherever they want to go to. But my biggest pleasure in the past has been, you get like local students and they all say, you say, okay, now we're going to go and we're going to do a walking tour around the old Grey Street area. It's like takes 3 hours, and we take books with us and we stop here and we say, okay, now Aziz Hassam's book, The Lotus People, let's read a paragraph. And we're standing there and he's discussing Madrasa Arcade, and people think we're all mad, and we probably are mad, but it's terrific to get like really our local students to be able to say, I didn't know that. That's amazing. I think we live in an interesting place. And they're not frightened either. You go in a group and you can walk around and there's I don't know, people are just welcoming, and they say, what are you doing here? Why are you reading? Why are you stopping outside my store? And you'll say, you don't know it, but then there's a book called Flat 9, and your shop is in one of the short stories, and here's a little extract, and you read it, and they go, really? So my best actually is for us all to know who our writers are. And I wish there was once a project, and I think it would be really nice if we could do it, to get the libraries back on board, to say, like, if you go to KwaMashu Library or whoever, whatever branch library, these are our writers, you know. Here's examples, here's some pictures, or I don't know, here's some books that we hold, or any, you know, go to the main library, Pietermaritzburg. It's called Bessie Head Municipal Library. Bessie Head, we don't think of as KZN, but she was born in Pietermaritzburg. So they've named, the municipality named the library after her. Okay, she was only here, 18 or so years, and then she went off to Botswana, and she's, you know, a huge African literature writer. But we must claim her. She was born here, you know. So people maybe don't know who Bessie Head is, but, you know, we need to know who all these people are. I know Mazizi Konene's family is still, they run, I don't know if it's still open to the public, but it's a terrific resource if you're interested. He was Poet Laureate of Africa, Mazizi Konene. You know, he was big, he was a really big figure for us. I know there's all sorts of people. You can wander around Durban, and that's my best thing, is you just take us. Like, if we could all get up now and just walk around and say, okay, Durban Station, who's written about it? Are there any short stories about the station? Graphic novelists, I don't know, is anyone doing anything digital about, you know, the spoken word? You know, there used to be a big thing in I'm going back now, like the Staff Rider Drum era, where there were things called train stories, you know, stories about stuff that happened on the trains, because it was the big commute always in and out of Joburg. You know, like, there've got to be train stories, I presume. I don't know, I just haven't done the research, but there's beachfront stories, there's, I don't know, go much further afield, there's Ishawe stories.
Thank you so much. I can actually attest, because coming into KZN, so I was in Gauteng, it's a culture-rich province. You know, I would be traveling with my colleague and we're doing site visits. It's like every corner has a story. And I've always found it fascinating. You go into meetings, everybody has his tagazel. We would have clan praise names, but not necessarily to an individual. If you go into the depth of it and the meaning and where it comes from, it's so rich. And I think it's one of the things that it becomes definitely necessary for us to retain in our day and culture. I'm going to ask an open-ended question, and I think it's to all the panelists. If you want to go first, it's fine. The meta platforms, we are currently trying to integrate the mature generation and the younger generation. That the beauty of the integration between these different generations. How do meta platforms, spaces such as Twitter, Facebook, all these other social media, WhatsApp, how do we bring them on board in terms of promoting local literature? And I just want to add this point to say, I wake up and I open my phone. Sometimes, especially as the younger generation, we find it easier to just scroll through and read a short paragraph. How do we create that integration so that we create a consistent interest of our own literature? Can I start with you, Witsi?
Sure, that's a very good question. And by the way, I didn't know Bessie was born in Durban. Ah, that's interesting. You should claim it. On the matter of the metaverse, as you put it, it's something that I've been working on for the past year or so. Any artists here or anyone who's into the whole metaverse concept will know about non-fungible tokens, NFTs. And when I got introduced into NFTs, this is last year, and I'll explain what NFTs is in a sec. When I got introduced to it, I was very skeptic. Okay, I come from a traditional, just publish a hard copy and find a way to sell it. And it got to a point where, because of COVID, it's very hard to move around objects. So we need to put stories on the screen so that they reach the market. And now, and they call that, for instance, the YouTubes and all that stuff, Vimeo, wherever you get to watch film or videos, They call it Web 2.0. Now, the whole metaverse situation started happening and started booming a few years ago. Obviously, in Europe. Now it's in Africa, and not NFTs have become a big thing. Specifically, when you start getting into Twitter and you get into these rooms where they chat, right, about NFTs, even the clubhouses. Now it's moved on to Web 3.0. That's what they call it. And what is an NFT? A non-fungible token is basically something that cannot be replaced. Am I saying it correct? So, for instance, if I make a piece of art, whether it's a digital, maybe I've done it digitally, or I've painted it using normal paint, or I've drawn it using a pencil, I can then put it up on a platform online, and I can sell it using Ethereum or crypto. Let me just use crypto for the sake of explaining the concept. Now, this is not an art piece that you can take and put it on your wall at home. It's an art piece that stays on the metaverse. In other words, it stays on the internet, but it's valuable and it's yours, and you can resell it, and like normal art is. How do we transition stories from analog to not only just digital, but to the metaverse, to NFTs? That's very hard. I've been trying to do that, and firstly, the barrier of entry is the problem right now. For instance, if you want to go into the Web 3.0 universe, just to get contracts and all this stuff, you can easily spend $500,000 just to put your art there and have a website so that people can buy it. Why? Because most of the people who are building this space are overseas. So when you speak to them and you need the software done for you, they're charging in dollars. So right now, it's a market that, as Africans, we really need to tap into, but we need to be able to build it ourselves, if I may say that. And we need to be able to put our stories on it, because what's happening is that we are being left behind. We don't even have enough stories of our own on the internet as it is. I mean, even if you just go to YouTube, in fact, just give a child a tablet and tell them to go onto YouTube and watch something. 9 times out of 10, they'll watch a show that's in English that is probably American, you know? And they can't help it, but it's our job, and we can't expect anyone else to do it for us. Likewise, with the metaverse, we need to say, okay, we want our own stories in the metaverse. Let's get together and let's figure out how to do that, because no one else will do that for us.
Thank you. I would like to pose the same question to Prof. and Mr. Schauchelo online. So can I just start with you, Prof?
Agreed. NFTs are really fascinating. I mean, I'm old enough that I have a child who's very interested in NFTs. Just as a question maybe back to you, I've never understood, like, say you've got your graphic novel, say you uploaded it as an NFT. If you do it, it's okay, but if someone else did it, how do you benefit from that? I mean, it's more like pieces of art. If you're not the artist, do copyright? Not copyright, but would some portion of the proceeds every time it's sold on, would that come back to you?
Yes, that's a very good question, Lindy. It's like you say, you upload portions of the story, and you could, for instance, put a royalty fee on it. Okay. So if I decide to sell it for 1 Ethereum, I don't know, I haven't checked the facts, so please rather do the research yourself. Hypothetically, 1 Ethereum could be worth, say, $3,000. And then you do the math, how much that would be in rands. Now, if I upload something and I sell it for that 1 Ethereum, but then I put a royalty fee behind it that says, you can now own this, but if you decide to sell it, I can take 10%. And the cool thing about the metaverse is that I can sell any artwork that I own, and I can sell it multiple times. Now, if I'm selling your art and I'm selling it multiple times, you'll keep getting those royalties. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks. But I suppose on this KZN literary tourism site, we've always had a digital presence in terms of we've had it started really with a website because that was the easiest way to have it as a teaching medium way back when. So as I say, everything was for free downloaded. We put up all these author profiles. We had documentary films that we made on various people and put up. In fact, a really interesting one at the time was, she's not local in that born or anything like that, but she wrote, Marguerite Poland wrote 2 books, Abundant Herds and Recessional for Grace, based here. And we did a wonderful documentary with her. Abundant Herds was about going through a whole herd of cattle and looking at isiZulu naming practices for cattle and looking at anyway, it was a beautiful film. So all these things were for free download. What I like particularly, I mean, the most excited I got was we had a map. And when I say had, that was with KZN Tourism. Whether they still have it, I do not know. But it's a map of KZN, and you could have, say, a name like whoever. You wanted Mandla Langa. And it would hover over where he's from, and you could click on it, and it would, do the usual expanding into facts about him, an extract from him. So it was a whole online map that you could find writers from this province. In terms of Twitter, Facebook, I've had research assistants who've helped, and they've monitored, done a Twitter feed. It's for things more like if you've got a book launch coming up, or a writer's got something newsworthy, or have you thought of this, or a new poem or something. And I would always encourage people who wanted to get their stuff out there, send us your poetry. It might be, I don't know, terrible, it might be fine, but it'll get to an audience. Yeah, so we've had Twitter and a Facebook feed, and that was really quite successful. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sis Hagelo Online, if you can just also give us your views on the topic itself.
I think when somebody thinks of literature, they automatically develop a notion and start thinking of a large libraries and a huge pile of books. And now we see young people forming book clubs, buying books, more specifically books, that are written by African authors, analyzing these books. And I mean, literature is not complete if it hasn't been read and critiqued by the readers. And this phenomenon of criticizing has been brought to a next level by social media, So nowadays people are sort of analyzing the books of many authors through social media, which means that social media has provided a platform to discuss various elements of books to a wide range of readers, which was absent, in the earlier time. So social media basically has provided a literary platform for the dissemination, So we see a lot of these things happening. Being bought, we see a lot of interest, in the literature environment. And I feel like we're not there yet completely, but we are heading towards a very positive direction, by using social media as a tool, because I mean, literature itself, it's a media tool to sort of, send communication to other people, and using that with social media, it will basically get many emerging writers out there, many authors out there that have published books, that are not known. And with the interest that we're having as young people in South Africa, young people in Africa, into African literature, and using that with social media, I think we're really, really heading towards a very positive direction as a country.
Thank you so much, Hagelo. So that we just don't make it an on-stage conversation, I'm going to allow for questions from the audience. So I'll note that by a raise of hands, you can direct the questions to any of the panelists on stage. Any questions?
Sanibonani. Igama lami uThabo Mhlamvu. Can I please ask laphayana uthena mfethu if you want to send your stuff to this NFT, there's no like entry level. It's only one thing for professionals. Like for example, if I want to, there's no like, for example, with media, I'm in film and television. So if someone comes to me and say, hey, I want to be on this space, I can just say, you know what, instead of waiting for broadcasters and big places like and SAPC, just go to YouTube, then learn from there, post your stuff. Is going to Web 3.0 the only way? There's no like entry level whereby you can just start there. It's only one thing. Like for yeah.
Okay, ngiyabonga mfethu. Bani igama? uThabo. Ngiyabonga Thabo. If I understand your question correctly, ngizozama uku-explain. Ungena kuma NFTs, you don't need to be a professional ndondon. You know, you don't have to have degree. You just need to be doing art. And art in a sense, which it could be music, it could be film, photography, noma yini. Okay. In fact, in the metaverse, they're even selling houses, you know, virtual houses. You can buy a virtual house and just own it on the internet and resell it. And how you make your money, you connect that to a wallet, which is linked to the account on the metaverse. They generally call it the Rainbow Wallet. And you get your Ethereum Lapo, and then you can convert that into Imali. That's okay. So anyone, in terms of anyone who wants to enter that space can, anytime. You don't have to be at a certain level or have any qualifications. Nguphendulile umbuzo wakho. Yeah.
Sign up. You can just go and sign up to Instagram. Where do I go and sign up now?
Yeah, good question, Thabo. Okay, so maninga ma platform. So for instance, social media. We have different platforms. We have Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Gonke. And you choose what's your vibe. Now, in terms of the metaverse, you get similar platforms as Hlugile, and they serve a different purpose. So for instance, there's OpenSea. OpenSea, you can Google OpenSea. You'll see Lapo, as soon as ungena Lapo, you'll see there's a lot of art by different people all around the world. And you'll see it's marked up by Ethereum, nan. Now, you need to create an account Lapo, and then you can put up your work. But when you put up your work, there's a process called minting. Minting process is when you actually have to buy, it's almost like you have to buy the privilege to actually sell. And it's not cheap, and in Akona, you need to know when to buy because, you know, like my exchange rates, it fluctuates. You could spend a lot of money, it's called gas. You could spend a lot of money just so you could plug yourself onto the thing, you know. Now, I'm not really well versed in this space. I only started looking into it, so I advise that you actually start Googling and finding out what NFTs do and all that. So Zining, others, you need to be invited to come onto their platform. Yeah, like Origin, I think. But Maning, you just need to Google. But I would suggest to call it OpenSea, 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 and then see what you can do with that.
Thank you so much, Butsi. I think there was a hand. Over to you, sir.
Hi everyone, Sanbonani. I'm Kamalang Ngobanele Shabalala. I actually have more of a comment versus a question. When it comes to crypto, to the gentleman there who's actually very much interested, the possibilities are actually quite endless. I also recently took some time to actually look into cryptography and its current form and the blockchain and how it actually works and the abilities that you actually unlock when it comes to a smart contract, for instance. Because we've had so many instances, especially in the creative industry, whereby one party says, no, but I thought I was agreeing to this, and the other party says, no, but you signed for this, and I agree with this. And at certain intervals, it has gone so badly that you would see two original signatures in two different kind of contracts. And there's been issues with that. When you look at cryptography and the blockchain, the capabilities of a smart contract, whereby it's actually a contract which you cannot change once you actually go into it and you agree to it. I see a sense of, I'm a geek, guys, by the way. I'm a geek and I love the arts. I started with the arts, then I started breaking a few computers and then I became a geek while I was at it. But when you marry the two, it gives us some capabilities which allow us as a creatives to actually own our own art and the ability to actually create money from that. I think the most crudest form you can look at from a digital perspective is Spotify and Apple Music. For the first time, when you look at even your likes of, I think I saw them here, so I'll mention them by name, CD Baby. For the first time, you could actually bypass a big corporate, the likes of EMI and all of them. I'm not going to continue down the line. But for the first time, we actually owned our own music. Royalties, you signed up front. It was an easy to understand language. It wasn't jargon. And it's also easy to get it's also easy for you to actually get your payments. And you know exactly when you're getting your payments, how much it is, and if there are any deductions, you know beforehand. And I have never come across anybody, I'm yet to see it, who has actually said, no, but I didn't sign for this with CD Baby or this other platform or this other platform. But somehow when we still stick to traditional ways whereby it's a contract between you and I, which we draft out, there's always arguments, which I find a bit interesting, but it's also quite exciting because when you look at it from a perspective of arts and culture and tourism, it unlocks certain things we can do. And I just hope there isn't anybody else who has a hand up. I'm about to take all your time. Huh? I'm excited with the entire conversation. Prof, you touched on tourism and you were looking at routes, right? I think if I remember correctly, you were talking about travel routes, right? Am I correct?
About what? About travel?
What you talked
Travel
about?
books.
Yes.
Yeah, I was talking about people traveling on these walking trails maybe, or they could be trails that you can just do from your armchair to in your head.
All right, okay, cool. So the one thing which okay guys, I do quite a lot, so I'm not gonna go into it, but on your end, there's one thing which I'm trying to do with Zululand. There's a place called Ngodini Bundus there. And at this current moment that we're having conversations with another institution, I'm not gonna mention because you're from UKZN, but the idea was basically to show us that human interaction is very important, and I think you can never, almost never, ever replace that human touch. But technology allowed us to actually do tours, virtual tours. So right now we're in talks of actually filming the entire area, and then we can actually have a person sitting in the comfort of their own home. It could be Wandengezi, it could be Emlazi, it could be Nongoma, and you can actually put on your Gear VR on, and you can literally tour an entire place. In the future, what I envision is what we're going to probably do is we're probably going to have drones which you can drive. So imagine going onto your Oculus VR. You actually fly your own drone. You actually do a full-on tour of a game reserve or you do a hike from your own comfort of your own home. That also unlocks the capabilities that you actually have with people who are immobile. So people who are on wheelchairs. Now they can actually go hiking from the comfort of their own home. So it's those things we're actually looking at. So I'm actually quite interested. As I was diving in, I'm not going to take your time anymore. Thank you. Before you cut me, I don't want you to play the music.
Thank you so much, Putwam. We truly appreciate that. The beauty of these conversations is that they also become educational, not just to the audience, but to us as well, because we form part of the community. I just want to see if there are any other hands. So you decided not to ask a question anymore.
Thank you very much. My name is Sakelem Zalazala. I just wanted to comment on what my brother was saying in terms of most of these new technological stuff are coming from overseas. You know, it's true, but we've got so many engineers now, so many people who are doing stuff, you know. We've got people who are designing websites, you know, and ever since this fourth industrial revolution, where now we are digitizing everything, I always feel like everything is turning into, it goes into English. You know, we forget to translate things, you know, for our people, because you find out that the same history that we are talking about, that we have, there's someone somewhere in the rural areas who have it, who wants to share it, but then the problem is they can't express it in English, you know, but we have it in Zulu. And another one wants to read about that, but when you go online, you always find English. I've been fighting with the company that, actually it was not even a fight, but I was suggesting with the company that I'm working for, that I've got so many people who are doing Maskandi, who never went to school, but they want to upload their music. They want to open up accounts, but when they get to the website, it's still English. So I just want to know if, like, in what you are doing, is there anything that you are like working on in terms of translations, in what you already have that is out there, but can I still get it in what you already have that is out there, but participate with you? Thank you. Able to read it and able to participate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think also in the interest of time, I will allow Mutsia for you to take the question. I'll actually allow all the participants, the panelists, to just tap into that or respond to that question. But also coupled with that, if you can just share with us your parting shots, because in the interest of time, we're about to go to our leg stretch break to allow for the next session.
Well, thanks for the question, brother. Yes, it is true that a lot of content online, in fact, almost everywhere is in English. I mean, we are talking in English, Konamanch, right? I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Inkinga is when we who are able to actually put content out there, we are not doing it in our languages. It's one thing, and then we translate. Kodwa, we need to remember, our languages carry the history of its people. So if we want to write in English, we are writing within the boundaries and cultures of English people. And to say that we'll just translate it, okay, kodwa if ngibhala ngesiZulu mhlambe ngithi hamba ubeka indlebe laphaya, it's not the same in English, you know. So there are nuances that we need to be aware of when we put content out there. Sibhale ngesiZulu kuqala, not English and then translate. That's my thing. And parting shots, I'm seeing some school people here. It's nice that you're here, and if you're into the arts, I encourage you. And yeah, if you have questions pertaining arts, Nanani, I'm available. Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much, Mutsia. Can we go to you, Prof. Lindy?
Yeah, I think really good question about language as well, because I think part of the beauty of this province, besides all our terrific writers and artists, is we've got languages. And we mustn't, English is often the sort of common language maybe, or the language sometimes we use on these platforms, but it's really, really important to make sure that all the languages are heard. And I think what's brilliant about literary tourism, say, if you even took an area like Zululand, we've just talked about Zululand, you know, people are coming at Zululand from different language groups, and they see it. Some things will be the same and some things will be really different, because language carries culture, and you know, you'll come at things, and there'll be class distinctions, there'll be you know, all different kind, gender, all sorts of things might be different, but you'll
have your comments and your parting shots.
Yeah, you know, I think I agree with what Sia said earlier on about language development in South Africa. We still have a long way as a country to develop our own indigenous language. You know, during the week, I read an article that the Minister of Education and her team, they want to sort of have African languages implemented in the schools so that they can be used as a language of learning and a language of teaching. And for me, I think that is a very big step towards, having our languages, out there. But the problem is the development of language. Like Sia said, if I ask you what is a tiger in isiZulu, what would you say? And, we struggle in Setswana, Sesotho, Tshivenda, Xitsonga. We don't have many things that, we can name in our own languages. So the problem starts there. And I think if we can get it right, and like Sia said, and we get together in a room, and if we have identified words that do not exist in our languages, then we develop those words, then that would be our starting point into making sure that we have things not translated, but written in our own language. So cutting short, in terms of copyright law, like I said, for emerging writers and authors, it's very important to work with reputable publishers. If you're going to self-publish your work, because self-publishing it's also in, make sure that you work with like reputable editors, reputable typesetters, people, suppliers that are well known and they've done work before. But most importantly, just connect yourself, go to the PASA website, like I said, connect yourself with book publishers that I know, because us as book publishers, we are cultural agents and transmitters of ideas. And our obligation is to make sure that, your rights are protectors as much as ours. So having said that, I wish all the emerging writers all the best, and I'm hoping to see more stories coming out in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you so much. To my amazing panelists, thank you so much for forming part of the conversation. Also inspiring ideas, because I think that's the beauty of communication. There's a whole lot of comments and contributions that came up from this conversation that I believe that will continue. A conversation is always the starting point of anything great. So thank you so much for your participation. Truly appreciate the time. And I think for this session, it would be appropriate for me to close it in my native language, Kyaleboga. Can I just make an announcement? There's just one mental health session that's happening today. So starting at 11 o'clock till 1:30. So thank you. Ngiyabonga.